Hello everyone, and welcome to the Role of Municipal Heritage Committees webinar. This is the 10th in our Strengthening Ontario's Heritage Network webinar series. My name is Heather Anderson, and I'm the Executive Assistant at the Ontario Historical Society. The Ontario Historical Society is a nonprofit corporation and registered charity, a non-government group founded in 1888, bringing together people of all ages, all walks of life, and all cultural backgrounds interested in preserving some aspect of Ontario's history. The Community Heritage Ontario is a provincial umbrella organization and advisory body for municipal heritage committees. Their mission is to be an advocate for heritage in Ontario, to encourage the development of municipally appointed heritage advisory committees, and to further the identification, preservation, interpretation, and wise use of community heritage locally, provincially, and nationally. So our speaker today, Wayne Morgan, is an independent heritage planning consultant and a registered professional planner with 34 years of professional experience. From 2000 to 2006, Wayne served as the senior coordinator with the City of Toronto's Heritage Preservation Services, managing the approval of proposals involving heritage properties and establishing 4 heritage conservation districts. He is a member of the Canadian Institute of Planners, the Ontario Professional Planners Institute, and the Canadian Association of Heritage Professionals Planning category. Wayne is currently the Vice President of Community Heritage Ontario. So I'm just going to switch control of our screen to Wayne, so please just wait one moment while we change views.
Good morning, and thank you for attending. Heather has given you a brief biography. Just something to add, I was also the chair of a Municipal Heritage Committee for 20 years in Newmarket, and I've also lived in a designated building. So I have a considerable experience in heritage matters and in working as a member of a Municipal Heritage Committee, which at the time were called Local Architectural Conservation Advisory Committees. So for some of you older members, you might remember that. Just a brief overview of what a Municipal Heritage Committee is and what it should be doing. It's a committee appointed by Council to advise it on heritage conservation matters as set out in the Ontario Heritage Act, in the bylaw that established the committee, and any other documents, procedures, or directives that have been given by Council. So it's a very prescriptive role that has been given to the Municipal Heritage Committee, and I emphasize the word advise. It's not a decision-making body, it's an advisory body. The other important thing to remember is that a council, has discretionary powers to appoint a Municipal Heritage Committee. So you're going to see some acronyms in the slides. MHC is Municipal Heritage Committee, OHA is the Ontario Heritage Act. So it has discretionary power. It does not have to appoint an MHC in order to exercise its powers under the Ontario Heritage Act. So it may appoint an MHC composed of not less than 5 members. Currently, there are 151 MHCs in the province, so most municipalities are using Municipal Heritage Committees. The other important thing to remember when we're dealing with the Ontario Heritage Act is that heritage conservation is property-based. The references are always to a property. So you may be dealing with a building, but it's a building on a particular property. So you'll see those references throughout. So let's take a look at the Ontario Heritage Act and see what the role is that's specified for a Municipal Heritage Committee. And if we look, there is not one section that sets out the role. Rather, there are clauses scattered throughout the Ontario Heritage Act that make reference to the role of the Municipal Heritage Committee. So when we deal with Part 4 of the Act, which addresses the designation or conservation of individual properties, it states that Council must consult with its MHC, where one is appointed, before adding or removing a property that has not been designated under the in the Register of Properties of Cultural Heritage Value, and that's Section 27 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And this we refer to as listed properties. So an MHC has to be consulted before you add or remove a listed property to the register. Now, that's a requirement under the Act. The MHC could also recommend listings to the Council. But if it's going to do that, it should ensure that Council supports the Municipal Heritage Committee process for recommending listings. Because the Act is quite narrow in dealing with listed properties. It simply says all you have to do is have the municipal address to add it to the register. But some councils require consultation with property owners. They may also require reasons why it is needs to be added to the list. So that's listed properties. Dealing with the designation of individual properties, again, Council must consult with its MHC before giving notice of Council's intent to designate a property. Okay, so this is Section 29. Again, the MHC can recommend to Council properties that it thinks may be worthy of designation, but I also stress that you should seek Council support for the process that you choose in recommending designations and in identifying properties that have merit. Also dealing with the designation of individual properties, the Heritage Act specifies that Council must consult with its Heritage Committee before giving notice of a proposed amendment to the designation bylaw. So this is a property that's already designated. We're now proposing to amend it. Council must also consult with its MHC if it's going to de-designate a property. Okay, so this is Section 30.1 and 32, and this is repealing a designation bylaw. So your MHC has to be consulted. You give advice back to Council. Okay, still staying with individual properties that are designated, Council must consult with its MHC before deciding on an application to alter the heritage attributes of a designated property. So this is a case where you've got the property designated, someone is coming in proposing to make an alteration, they submit a heritage permit application, Council must come back to its MHC and say, what do you think of this alteration? Again, you give your advice back to Council. Now, the Ontario Heritage Act also gives municipal councils authority to delegate its responsibility to approve alterations to heritage properties. So, if it sets up a bylaw delegating that authority, it must consult with its Municipal Heritage Committee prior to passing that bylaw. So your responsibility is to look at this bylaw. Is it giving appropriate authority back to the council? Is it meeting your expectations? Because once that authority is delegated to staff or an official, they no longer have to consult with the MHC. And there are reasons for doing this. Sometimes the alterations may be minor. They may be quite standard in terms of how they alter things to a building, so that it's appropriate to give this authority to staff so that those minor alterations can be dealt with expeditiously. Finally, dealing with individual properties, council must consult with its Municipal Heritage Committee before deciding on an application to demolish a building or structure. So this deals with the demolition of buildings. And again, your role is to advise council whether you support or oppose the application to demolish. This is this next one, heritage easement agreements, is one that not many municipal heritage committees or councils have used, but I suggest that that you take a look at this approach. A municipal easement agreement is one of the strongest tools you have in your toolbox to protect a heritage building. There are examples of this you can find in other municipalities, how they've used them, what they look like, but it provides the best protection for a conservation of a building. And in this case, again, council must consult with its Municipal Heritage Committee before passing a bylaw entering into an individual heritage easement agreement on a property. So we move to Part 5 of the Act. We're still in the Ontario Heritage Act. We're still dealing with the role of municipal heritage committees as specified in the Act. And here, council must consult with its Municipal Heritage Committee with respect to a Heritage Conservation District study. So council could take the initiative. On the other hand, the Municipal Heritage Committee could recommend to council areas that they think are worthy of study. Once a study has been done and the council is considering adopting a district, the Ontario Heritage Act requires that it must consult with its Municipal Heritage Committee before approving a bylaw adopting a Heritage Conservation District plan. Again, this is Section 41. So every Heritage Conservation District now must have a plan, so the role of the committee is to review that plan and advise council of what it thinks of the proposed plan. Also dealing with heritage conservation districts, council must consult with its Municipal Heritage Committee before deciding on an application to demolish or remove a structure in a heritage conservation district. Again, you'd advise council whether you think the demolition is appropriate. Now, in the Act, there is no requirement that a Municipal Heritage Committee be consulted on alterations to properties within a heritage conservation district. The intent here is that you've had your opportunity to provide advice in the plan, and the plan would set out requirements for alterations to a property. However, the plan may also specify a role for a Municipal Heritage Committee. So this is outside of the Ontario Heritage Act, but it's within the plan for the district, that you, a Municipal Heritage Committee could be consulted on alterations within a Heritage Conservation District. But again, that would have to be in the plan, and it's not something that's covered by the Ontario Heritage Act. So we've dealt with the the Ontario Heritage Act and how it sets out the role of a Municipal Heritage Committee. Very prescriptive, and it's associated with individual property designations and heritage conservation districts. Now we turn to the Municipal By-law that created your Municipal Heritage Conservation District. And there may be additional activities that the bylaw sets out for a Municipal Heritage Committee, and these vary among municipalities. And I'm going to cite some of the following examples, some examples in the following list that Municipal Heritage Committees are responsible for. So a Municipal Heritage Committee may advise Council on heritage conservation legislation, such as property standards for heritage properties. The Ontario Heritage Act in Section 35.3 enables a municipality to establish property standards for heritage buildings or heritage properties, but it has to pass a bylaw. You could advise your council on what that bylaw should look like. And this is a bylaw that I encourage many municipalities to set out since it's the most effective tool for preventing demolition of heritage buildings by neglect. So this would be property standards for maintaining a heritage building. And a number of municipalities have such standards, and you could consult other properties for such standards. Again, when we look at grants for heritage properties, the Ontario Heritage Act enables a municipality or municipal council through Section 39 of the Act to provide grants to heritage properties. You could advise, you meaning the Municipal Heritage Committee, could advise your council on a grant structure. Legislation also enables property tax reductions for designated heritage properties, whether that's individually designated or designated under the designated as a heritage conservation district. Again, you could advise your council on such property tax reductions, and there are examples of a number of municipalities that have done that sort of thing. There's also other federal, provincial, and some federal legislation that may affect heritage conservation in your municipality. And one thing I'm thinking of here is Parks Canada's standards for the conservation of historic places in Canada. This is available on Parks Canada's website, and it sets out best practice for the conservation of individual buildings, landscapes, and districts. So it's something, if you haven't already had a chance to look at, you should be looking at. Several municipalities have endorsed this as the standards, Parks Canada standards, as best practice for heritage conservation in their municipality, and alterations to designated properties should conform to those standards. So that's one thing you could look at and advise your municipality on. Frequently, the bylaws that enact Municipal Heritage Committee set out a public education role for the committee, and it's a public education role that's focused on heritage conservation. It's usually they're very general in the municipal bylaw, but examples of heritage, public heritage conservation that municipal heritage committees have undertaken are walking tours, They've prepared brochures about the community heritage in their municipality. They've held workshops regarding heritage conservation. Workshops, I think, are an effective tool for reaching out to your property owners that are already designated, because they're often wondering, okay, what is the best way to conserve my property? You could assist by holding such a workshop. Placking is an interesting educational role, and it's one that reaches out to anybody who's walking by a heritage building. You could also do displays on your community heritage and the heritage properties. And also, you may have to deal with public inquiries about heritage conservation in your municipality. Again, if you're going to undertake a public education, I strongly advise that you keep your council involved in the initiatives that you're proposing to undertake. So that's public education. There are municipal procedures that may affect the role of a municipal heritage committee, and council may require your committee to consult on planning matters, and these could include studies. Frequently official plans and amendments to official plan are undertaken, and there's a heritage component in it. The council may ask for your input. There could be secondary plans, so more detailed plans or area studies that are undertaken by your municipality. And again, you may be asked to give your opinion on the heritage conservation in those areas. So that's studies. Now, there are also applications made under the Planning Act, such as plans of subdivision, rezonings, severances, that may involve properties with heritage resources, and you may be asked to consult on those applications. It's important that for dealing with planning matters, that the Municipal Heritage Committee understand the provincial policy statement that's been issued under the Planning Act, and in particular Section 2.6 of the policy statement, which deals with heritage matters. There are very strong policies in there that have to be considered for planning applications. So it's important that your committee be familiar with that. Other procedures that may affect a Municipal Heritage Committee are building permit applications. So a council may require consultation with the Municipal Heritage Committee on such applications, and on heritage permit applications within the Heritage Conservation District. Again, that would have to be set out in the plan for the Heritage Conservation District. It's important in dealing with it, when you're dealing with these applications, that you have an effective and quick process for dealing with them. The chief building official, when they deal with building permits, is under considerable legislative requirements to deal quickly and timely with applications that are submitted for a building permit. So you may have to develop procedures that go beyond your, say, usual monthly meeting that you have in order to deal with such applications. So in carrying out your role, it's important that a Municipal Heritage Committee understand the Ontario Heritage Act. That's basic, and I've set out previously the requirements under the Act where you have to be consulted, but it's also important that you understand the full process for dealing with designations in heritage conservation districts. It's also important that your committee understand the planning process. Now that doesn't mean that everybody on your committee has to understand fully the process, but there should be somebody on your committee that understands how the planning process works and how heritage can be plugged into that process. Also, in carrying out your role, it may be required that you do research on properties. Some municipalities have staff that can do this. Some municipalities have the funds to hire consultants to do the research, but there are many that do not. So your committee must be prepared to do research if they want to broaden the heritage in the municipality, the heritage that is dealt with under the Heritage Act. Finally, and this is something that many municipalities haven't given much thought to, or many municipal heritage committees, but you have to monitor the heritage properties. It's great that you've got a property designated, either individually or as a heritage conservation district, but you have to have a process in place that deals with those properties after they've been designated, because things can happen. It's important that you understand and can see and can report back to your municipal staff on what is happening with those heritage properties. And sometimes to avoid inappropriate alterations to a property, go back to your education program. Have a program that reaches out to your designated property owners, that suggests ways that they can understand what is an appropriate alteration, so that you can avoid dealing with, after the fact, inappropriate alterations to a property that has been designated but doesn't require a building permit to make an alteration. In carrying out your role as a Municipal Heritage Committee, I think it's important to learn from the experience of other Municipal Heritage Committees. And you can do that in a number of ways. The upcoming Ontario Heritage Conference in Niagara-on-the-Lake is one way of reaching out to other Municipal Heritage Committees. Simply perusing the websites of other municipalities and seeing what their Municipal Heritage Committees are doing is another way. And I would also encourage you, if you aren't, join Community Heritage Ontario, because that is a way that we have as Municipal Heritage Committees of sharing our experience on issues with other Municipal Heritage Committees. It's really important for a Municipal Heritage Committee in exercising its role to develop and maintain effective communications with their council. This can include such things as sending your minutes to council, sending reports to council, advising them what you're proposing to do. It's always best to get it into council before you do it so they aren't taken by surprise. Frequently, Municipal Heritage Committees have a municipal councillor appointed as a member of the committee. Keep effective communications with that councillor and make sure that councillor is sharing their information they're getting from you with other members of council. You can also, through informal discussions with your council and municipal staff, bring these issues to their attention. But I stress, it's important you're an advisory committee to council. It's important to reach out to your council, let them know you exist, let them know what's important to you, so that they understand when issues come up that they have a committee that they should be consulting with. The other thing is that many municipalities have procedures, simple things from how their committee meets, how it's made open to the public, how the minutes are prepared, how the minutes are to be circulated. It's important that you as a committee understand those procedures and abide by those procedures. It's really important to go back to the first slide that I presented. The Municipal Heritage Committee role is advisory. You're an advisor to council. Council will consider your advice, but it's not required to follow that advice. And you should be prepared for situations where council will act against your advice. And if it does not follow your advice, it's important to go back and look at, okay, what did we do wrong? Why didn't they follow our advice? What ways can we take to improve the provision of such advice in the future? You know, simple things like maybe we should have contacted the owner of the property that we're sending a report to council on before we sent that report to council so that they knew what was happening. So your role is advisory to the council. Once council has made a decision, I advise strongly that the Municipal Heritage Committee not advocate for an outcome that's contrary to that decision. That is the role of other heritage organizations in your committee, or in your community. It's not, in my opinion, a role that the MHC should be undertaking. As soon as you start advocating against your council starts turning a deaf ear to you because you are its advisory committee, and why should they listen to you if in fact you're going to turn on them at a later date. So that's really important. Your role is advisory, and others in the community should understand that you're an advisory. You're not an advocacy organization. You're an advisory organization. And yes, sometimes you're not going to be listened to. The response of some municipal heritage committees has been to fold up shop, saying we're all going to resign. I don't think that's an appropriate way to deal with such situations, because then you no longer have a direct role into heritage decisions that are being made by the council. So, in summary, the Municipal Heritage Committee role is an opportunity. Even though you may get frustrated at times, it's an opportunity to bring a heritage conservation perspective to the municipal decision-making process. You're in on the inside when you're involved in the Municipal Heritage Committee on that decision-making process. So that's an opportunity for the Municipal Heritage Committee. For members that are on the committee, it's an opportunity to understand, to better understand the historical development of their community. The years that I sat on my Municipal Heritage Committee, I was always amazed at the things that I learned about my community, even though I thought I knew a lot about it. But it's a great opportunity for learning. So if you're interested in additional information about the role of a Municipal Heritage Committee, I suggest that you take a look at the Ontario Ministry of, I'm not sure of its name, Tourism, Culture and Sport. Okay, it changes from time to time. Anyhow, look at their website. There's something called the Ontario Heritage Toolkit on that website. And there's a document there called Your Community, Your Heritage, Your Committee, and it sets out some of the things that I've talked about. It also gives you a municipal bylaw. In the case of this report, it was the Chatham-Kent Municipal By-law. Your bylaw may be different, but you can take a look at others. And it also gave Thunder Bay's strategic plan and how heritage is involved in that strategic plan. So that's an additional resource that you can take a look at on the role of a municipal heritage committee. So to understand how other municipal heritage committees are pursuing their mandate, I suggest you join us either as a member, an individual member, or a municipal heritage committee member at Community Heritage Ontario. So with that, I'll turn it back to Heather.
So this is our question period right now. We're going to take questions in the chat space or in the Ask a section. So our first question comes from Terry Suter, and she asks, does Part 4, Section 37.1 apply to land?
Hang on a minute while I open up my copy of the Ontario Heritage Act. So use 37.1. Now I'll preface this by saying I'm not a lawyer, but I have had considerable experience in dealing with this. So 37.1 is the Heritage Easement Agreement, and a Heritage Easement Agreement is placed on title to the land. So it's something that's registered on title, and all subsequent owners of the property are bound by that Heritage Easement Agreement. A couple other things about Heritage Easement Agreements. They can specify that the property be insured, and that should there be a fire or some other adverse impact on the property, that the proceeds from the insurance policy will be used to restore or repair the heritage attribute, whether it's a building or a landscape feature. So there's the municipality, through a heritage easement agreement, can be named in the insurance policy for the property to ensure that the proceeds go back to restoring the property. The Heritage Easement Agreement can also set out standards for the maintenance of a heritage building or landscape. So, I mean, there are very strong features. The owner must be willing to enter into it. So frequently they're used when a planning application comes in and you're binding the landowner in the approval of the application. You get your application if you enter into a heritage easement agreement. That's how it happens, but there have been people that have come forward and said, I want a heritage easement agreement because I want to make sure that after I've left the property, it's still protected.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next question is from Vicky Leakey, and she asks, we live in an era in most communities where there are many properties that can be tied to some heritage significance. What criteria can be considered to thin out the list to identify those properties that can be financially sustained for a long time in the future?
I guess you should attend the the next workshop on or the webinar on designating heritage properties under Part 4. But the province has set out criteria dealing with the contextual, the design and historical importance of properties. You could narrow that list down by doing a very cursory application of those criteria to the properties. I've always found it best on a heritage committee to deal with willing property owners first. So if you've got a number of heritage properties and you've contacted them, go forward to your council with those property owners that are willing to support either the listing or the designation of the properties. Then you come back and you deal with your more problematic properties, and you know, you've used your criteria, you've narrowed it down, and then you may start looking at, okay, which ones are under the most imminent threat, and so you would deal with those properties. So that's one way of narrowing it down. Dealing with financial aspects, that's something that is really outside the mandate of a municipal heritage committee, and it's not something that we can easily get into without understanding the finances of a property and the owners of the property. So it's something that most municipal committees tend to stay away from.
Thank you. Our next question is from Kathy DeRuiter, and she asks, how is a heritage easement agreement differed from designation? Why is it better?
Okay, designation, you can appeal the designation on a property. A heritage easement agreement is registered in perpetuity on the property. There is no opportunity to appeal that designation. So it's permanent. Now it's permanent to the extent that council will continue to enforce it. But it remains on title. As I say, a Part 4 designation can be appealed to the Ontario Municipal Board. So there is that route. It could be repealed.
Okay, so I've got just two more questions. So next one is there a municipality and MHC that you think demonstrates best practices in terms of heritage work and preservation in Ontario? And if so, what kind of work are they doing?
This is a hard question to answer because the skills and the scope of heritage conservation vary from municipality to municipality. So, you know, some municipalities have very limited resources to exercise their role under the Ontario Heritage Act, whereas other municipalities have substantial resources. They have staff, they have funds. So as an example of a municipality that I think has been effective, and I don't know the work of all municipal heritage committees throughout Ontario, but of the ones that I have been involved in, one of the most effective one that has the staff, that has the money, is Markham. The city of Markham has done an excellent job. They have heritage conservation districts. They make very good use of their municipal heritage committee. They have dedicated staff who are focused on heritage conservation, and the word has gone out to the development community. Markham is very much under pressure, development pressure, that they have to take seriously heritage conservation in that municipality. So that's a larger municipality. I don't know. I think Collingwood has also been effective. So to the person from Collingwood, kudos to you. But your heritage conservation district, not notwithstanding the Admiral Collingwood school site, I think has been very effective. I walk down your Main Street and I'm just amazed at what has been done there with the cooperation of your municipal council. So those are a couple that of the larger municipalities that have been effective. So I'll leave it at that. Hopefully not offending anybody.
That was great, thank you. So we've just got a couple more. Further to the previous question, can an easement be removed by council?
No, an easement cannot be removed because it's been registered on title. Okay, you're asking me a legal question. Perhaps I should back off from that. I've never dealt with a situation where a heritage easement agreement has been removed. I've dealt with situations where they've been amended with both the consent of the property owner and the council. But I've never seen a situation where a municipality has gone in and removed a heritage easement agreement. So I'm sorry, you'd have to really ask that one of a lawyer.
Okay, so we just have one last question, and that is from Terry Suter, and she asks, what is the major difference between OMB and CRB in the way they are applied and make decisions?
Okay, I've attended both as an expert witness, and the Ontario Heritage Act specifies when matters are referred to the Conservation Review Board, the CRB, and when matters are referred to the Ontario Municipal Board. The other thing is the big difference is the CRB is an advisory body, much like a municipal heritage committee. They hold hearings and they issue reports, but the reports go back to the municipal council to make a decision in light of the report that's issued by the CRB. The municipal council does not have to comply with the report issued by the CRB. On the other hand, the Ontario Municipal Board issues decisions. So they can actually make a determination. They don't have to go back to the municipal council. They are the final authority, subject to any legal appeal that might follow, but they are the final authority on planning matters, and they can overrule a decision made by a municipal council. That's the big decision, a big difference. Attending both of them, the CRB tends to be a more informal approach, and have a more informal approach in its hearings. Whereas the Ontario Municipal Board, it's a much more legalistic and adversarial atmosphere than you'll find at the Conservation Review Board. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you everyone for your questions. So we'll just about ready to wrap up our presentation. Just lastly, I want to very much thank Wayne Morgan for his work with us today. And I also want to extend our thanks to Community Heritage Ontario. And let me take this opportunity to remind everyone that registration for the CHO's 2015 conference in Niagara-on-the-Lake, April 30th to May 3rd, is now open. Check out their website at 2015heritageconference.com for all details. Lastly, thank you very much to all you who attended the webinar today. We look forward to seeing you again in the future.